Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 17th of July, comes to you from London. And we start, as always, by looking at the dollar index, and we see here the dollar fell quite sharply on Friday. We have had a little bit of recovery this morning, but we are bearish below the cloud on the medium and long-term chart, medium and short-term charts, and the long-term chart is just now starting to turn bearish. We do still have these upside targets for the dollar long-term, but if we see a move back below this sort of 92.50 area, then that would deactivate this target. But the dollar, very long term, still has this bullish trend, but in the short and medium term, it is just looking more and more bearish all the time. And the euro is now looking stronger on the long term. Of course, the point and figure chart still suggests downward pressure on the euro, although this downside target has been negated, and so that is significant in itself. And we have got lots of short-term upside targets suggesting the euro could still strengthen quite firmly against the dollar in the coming weeks. The Japanese yen, we're seeing the dollar falling away here, so the dollar again fell quite sharply against the yen on Friday. And against sterling, even we're seeing the sterling rise here against the dollar. So that's a lot about dollar's weakness on sterling. Interestingly, we do have this new potential short-term target if this column locks, and that's about 136.87 at the moment, but we need to see how that column locks out before we can clearly say what the target will be. We're seeing here that sterling against the euro, quite a sharp recovery in the last few days last week, and that's put us in bullish territory. So sterling just looking stronger at the moment. And against the Swiss franc, even sterling has shown some renewed strength. And against the Aussie dollar, not as strong. So we're seeing that the sterling has had a little bit of a bounce on Friday, but the Aussie dollar also showing its own strength. So that's quite interesting. Looking at stock markets, the S&P 500 had a good run on Friday just at the end of the day. Closed the last bit of the session, just came back a bit, but did end the week on a high note, moving to a new all-time high. So that's of course bullish for the market. And looking at the Nasdaq, not quite at a new all-time high, but the recovery well and truly underway here on Friday. Dow Jones again moving higher to a new all-time high as well. So we're seeing very strong US markets again. And even the Russell 2000 had a good jump in the week and ended the week on a high note as well. Taking a look at the S&P future, very slightly up this morning, and the same on the Nasdaq E-mini. So no real clear direction as to which way the US markets will open today. FTSE 100 is up this morning, so we are seeing some improvement. We're back above the cloud on all three time frames. We do have a new upside target, but it's not yet activated. That's 3% upside to about 76.50. And looking at the FTSE 250, we are again through the cloud here, staging the beginning of a recovery on that short-term chart, finding support on the medium-term chart, so looking better. But there's an absence of long-term targets on the FTSE 250. Looking at the DAX, we're seeing here the DAX is bullish on all three time frames. Again, shortage of long-term upside targets, just a little bit disconcerting there. And the Nikkei is actually looking stronger and stronger all the time, with upside targets on all three charts. 39, 37%, two targets there clustering, and targets around 3, 5, 6% on the short term. So Nikkei looking stronger all the time. Hang Seng looking very bullish, having bounced quite strongly in the last week and making new highs. So we are just seeing that back to 215 highs. So that's 2-year highs, and that's very good for the market. Shanghai Composite was actually down quite sharply on Friday, bucking the trend. Tends to do the reverse of other markets, the local market in China, and we are just seeing this downside target here, but it is looking still pretty bullish. And the Sensex, the India market looking better and better all the time, still looking very bullish on all three time frames. The Australian market, a little bit more in the doldrums in Oz, and we're just seeing here the medium-term chart is still bearish, not looking as good as the US or Europe at the moment. Brent crude continued a bit of its recovery on Friday, and we are just in a short-term uptrend at the moment. But interestingly, we do still have this downward pressure on the chart. Just looking at the short term, we're seeing here 7%, 3%. So we are seeing that move. WTI, much the same thing we're seeing there as well. Bullish in the short term, but the medium term still bearish. Nat gas just above the $3 mark now, just nudging $3.01, and so it is looking a little bit more bullish, but the medium-term trend is still weighing a little bit there. Looking at copper, really rocketing in copper. This is a good proxy for industrial production, and we're seeing here that copper is just moving very strongly ahead. Taking a look at some of the other indices, coffee quite strongly up at the moment, but still bearish medium and long term. Looking at cocoa, still bearish in the medium to long term. Sugar is looking better short term, but medium and long term bearish. And soybeans, again, just medium term recovering, but long term still bearish. Grains like wheat just pulling back quite a bit at the moment, back into a short term bearish trend. And corn has been quite volatile lately, again pulling back into the negative. Looking at gold, gold had a good week last week, getting into its new bullish trend, recovery at the sort of same price levels that we saw in May, maybe a little bit lower, which is a bit worrying, but we're still bullish on the long-term chart in the cloud, and we are just holding that position. And the point and figure targets are there on the long-term and medium-term charts. An absence of short-term thrust targets makes the short-term chart a bit harder to call. And if we look at silver, silver also into a bullish trend. We do have an upside target here of 4% potential for silver, but the medium and long-term charts are still pretty bearish. US Treasury yields down to 2.3% on Fed comments last week and sentiment, and that is driving the dollar lower. So we're seeing yields just back to the low 230s. Having been as high as the 240s just in the last week. Looking at Apple, Apple recovered very strongly on Friday. We've pulled away from this sort of danger area of about 142, 142.50. Now looking much stronger on Apple stock. And Google also putting in a good recovery and now looking much better as well. And Amazon also looking pretty bullish on this chart. Facebook had a very good week, jumping to new highs. Again, I should declare an interest in Facebook shares. I hold the stock, but lots of multiple upside targets here. And so Facebook now nudging into the 160s. That's taking Facebook up 40% this year, so it's looking very strong. And Microsoft also, I have a holding in, looking strong as well, with quite a good performance at the end of the week. So that's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.